truth, facts, and sorting lies. There's a lot of people who have a hard time accepting the truth. And anytime you're going to work with analyzing data of any kind, you have to understand where your baseline is. If you don't know where the baseline is, the truth, a base, a section, a starting point, a true line, a true base, a true setting, if you don't know where that is, then basically you're lost. You have no center. You have nothing to work with. And there are many people who in life are stuck blowing in the wind. So covering hard items of truth, understanding how to work your data, understanding how to calibrate whatever product it is you're working with. If you're working with AI, you have to be able to calibrate AI properly. You have to understand where the center truth baseline is, or you're going to totally end up with something that is incredibly dangerous. It's one of those crucial areas that you just have to deal with. I'm not going to get too far into where these great dangers are with AI at the exact moment. But we have certain tells already. There are certain people that are upset. They're upset because they're getting communications from government, and government is saying, oh, well, we kind of want you to put these suggestions in here to protect government. The problem is what's being handed over in sheets, for instance, by the state of California, in backdoor passing, has people very upset. They're looking at this and they're going, this is wrong. We can't do this. Basically, they're asking for language models to be programmed with special governing systems that basically are propaganda, that are basically untruths. And this goes against the concept of running true AIs. Because when you step away from the true baseline core of understanding truth, this is where you end up with madness. This is where you end up with hallucinations, inaccuracies. So when you have people in government that are saying, on one hand, oh, we want language models to basically be governed, and we want parameters for protection, yet the very same information government is handing over is exactly the poison that you cannot, under any circumstances, put into the language model. Because you have people that have these ideas that are illegal, unconstitutional, and they want to put protectionist ideas that are not protectionist ideas. What they are is they're oligarchic ideas. They're caste system ideas. They're ideas to give illegal protection options to leadership, to government, to basically stop any form of investigative reasoning. And this is what part of the problem is. This is the problem about what ends up going wrong when you build an AI. You cannot lose your truth core. Because if you lose your truth core, you end up with a system of there is no way to recenter the system. Which means when it goes off into a tangent, like a hallucination, you can end up having it do all kinds of things. And if you have a backtoe system on your AI that is going to keep re-upgrading it and reprogramming it and keep mutating the material, you can end up permanently coming up with a poisoned AI model. And this is, people have discovered this kind of stuff before. Because you have people that have put different types of backdoor experiments that end up malfunctioning. So, in order to teach, at this moment, to teach you, if I'm going to teach you about true baseline, true center core, truth, then you have to understand what truth is. You need an understanding of where are we right now in society technologically, legally. So there's a lot of ways you could look at this. You could sit there and go, SAR satellite technology has been doing 60 frames per second, something like 2008, the highest in satellites. But definitely 2014. 2014, you had a bunch of stuff going on. It was doing 60 frames a second. Now you got people talking about doing resolutions on SAR satellites. These are, again, this is for those that may not know real quick. It's a radiographic imaging system that'll basically, a satellite will go right through the clouds. It can see a blade of grass. And then if you're talking about the frames per second, this is how many times per second a snapshot is basically being done. So if you're thinking about your videos, your DVDs, a lot of that stuff's only 22 frames a second. It's amazing. You know, you watch, there's a lot of movies you'll watch that are only 22 frames a second. That's actually the vast majority of them. Some are 30 frames per second, and then you had some of them that had the 30 up, and then you had the negative 30 frames, total 60 frames. But that's the old stuff. Most of the time people have abandoned that and gone to this 22, 25 frames per second type stuff. So you actually have a lot of movies out there. These things are like 16 frames per second. 16 millimeter film, a lot of that was only shot at 16 frames per second. Now, granted, some of these cameras would shoot faster. They were designed to shoot more frames per second. Old 7, 8 millimeter film, 8 frames per second. They would do 8 snaps per second. So this is pretty much what we have. So when somebody says we're doing a satellite from outer space that's 60 frames a second, now we want to do stuff that's 128, 256, 512 frames per second. That's when you want to be able to track the complete movement of a bee's wings, from outer space, from a satellite. And the way the methodology of a lot of these satellites works is you have a certain amount of the satellite technology that's devoted to a live action type situation. And this is a resource situation. But most of it, what it does is it's just grabbing frames. It's just repeatedly shooting frames all over the place. It's shooting this, it's focusing this radiographic data, and it's doing all these snapshots. So everything is actually recorded, and then you rework the data. You use computers to rework the data. And basically it's a grab all. It's a record all within a certain spot area, and it changes, very wide areas. So basically, when we're talking understanding SAR radiographic satellites, we're talking about the ability to go right through the cloud and see a blade of grass. This means that the angle of the satellite sees 70% of almost any object. So that means 70% of you is being captured. It's above you. It will not see your armpits because your armpits have the top of your arms hiding it. Won't see the bottom of your shoes, but in effect 70%. Now, when you have multiple satellites at different angles grabbing different data, you can mix these frames to increase it. It's very easy to go to 90% coverage and go to 90 frames per second from getting data basically from 3 different satellites. That's fairly easy to do in theory. Now, don't get me wrong. This is an enormous amount of mathematics. You're talking really, really pumping some computer stuff here to do this. But this is reality. This is reality. You know, our modern military stuff was into this kind of stuff decades ago. Many, many decades back, we were into this kind of stuff. So understanding the battlefield and understanding a blade of grass and how it can change colors and how it can be affected and how you can understand in conjunction with maybe a little bit of thermal type interpretation to be able to understand where somebody had walked previously recently. You know, so all this data, of course, is very important for battlefield. But these satellites do everything now. They're modern. You have European satellites all over the world. They're recording New York. They're recording Los Angeles. They're recording all of California. You have all of these massive numbers of overlapping satellites. They sell personalized security services. They do lots of environmental research, by the way. So you also have lots of research pertaining to geography, minerals, oil, etc. So when we're talking about the accuracy of AIs, there's a lot of areas that you have to be accurate about. So, you know, satellites, this is just one form of source, one input that's going into AI now. So there's a lot of other areas. Now, before I move on to other areas, let me give you a couple examples. There's an individual, there's actually about 30 individuals that did different types of really unique reports. And they did a bunch of radiographic stuff. One of them was on Waco. There was about 4 or 5 of them on Waco. I don't want to use the individual's name because there's several different ones that came up with different material. I just don't want to go into that. I'm going to talk about the data, but not the identity. They came up with a bunch of super refinement stuff involving satellite data, and I think the one person might have taken other people's work and worked it a bit more, where basically you had an armored vehicle running through the center of the camp, and you had multiple people with machine guns that were literally shooting people that were coming out of the building. But apparently there was no reading that these people had weapons. They were just trying to escape a burning building. Some of them were on fire, and they were just shooting them. They were just basically executing these people. And this person was like really upset because they're like, look at this conduct of what these agents are doing. You know, that goes all the way back to the Janet Reno stuff and the different stuff. And a lot of facts were hidden. There were some facts that came out in the media for a little bit and not covered a whole lot. And it was pretty bad. And people, naturally your head's thinking all this psychological stuff. So we're calibrating. We're putting in calibration. We're understanding where is the baseline center. So in order to basically balance you as you're interpreting information, I have to sit there and say, okay, well, there's additional data. Well, let's get it out on the line. We have, what was his name? The preacher guy. The guy had 14 wives. You know, the guy's got 14 wives. A little strange? Yeah. So it was an encampment idea that was basically build a church surrounded around basic babe in the Lord Christianity type philosophies and attract people that were having basically hard times in life, and many of them also would have problems with substance abuse and whatnot. So, you know, all these people that you could get, maybe some of them had genetic damage from their parents being exposed to chemicals or whatever. Maybe they drank too much of the punch that had something strange in it, whatever it was. So this was somebody making a semi-large church / cultism off of going around and getting a hold of the people that were despots mostly. An amazing number of these people actually were on like some form of disability, SSI, something. And a lot of them had kids. and they're going through life, So they all got together in this kind of community thing, and when you get 1,400 people together, and a lot of these people have money, you have your own bank. They had their own bank there. It was really interesting. At any given time, there was $500,000 basically on that property, and they had a bank to keep it safe. Now, they had also had problems with people trying to rob them from time to time, and the fiasco of the whole Waco situation with the ATF was a nightmare. They had all of their speakers were set at the wrong angles. You had noise canceling. You had noise intrusion from one speaker to another speaker. I mean, you sit down and you work the angles and you go, this is co-jamming. So when they're transmitting this data all at the same time, you literally look at this data and you go, these people were jamming their own signals. So instead of somebody hearing a clear voice, they were hearing a, and they're like, and you have no idea what these people are saying, because the speakers are fighting one another. They're actually throwing all this audio energy against itself. It was just really a horrible deployment situation on that. So you have them coming in the morning, early morning, it's dark, they're coming in with guns, they go in with ladders, they decide to go into the top floor, which happens to be the bank, which is really kind of odd that they decided to break into the bank, basically. So, I mean, it's kind of strange. For some reason, they thought that was the best approach, breaking into the bank. Another huge mistake, because since they'd already had problems with people that were basically trying to, steal $500,000 in cash, they had people there for security. And they're like, oh, wow, what's happening? We got people breaking into the bank. So from the inside viewpoint, you have people breaking in the bank. You have your sensors going off, your detection sensors going off, telling you have an intrusion of people breaking into the bank. Now, on top of all this, you have people that are dressed totally in black, and some of them had ATF written on them, but they're totally in black, and it's pitch dark. It's just really dark. And so they're breaking into the bank, and the security equipment's gone off, and these guys are once again dealing with the situation that they thought they'd have to deal with. We don't know what's happening. Somebody's coming in. So they're prepared for anything, and these guys are coming through the windows with guns, and they're going, what are you doing, man? He says, hey, look, freeze, you're under arrest. You're breaking into a bank. You've been caught red-handed. Put the guns down. And the ATF guys are screaming, no, you put the gun down. And these guys are like, no, you're breaking into our bank. You put the guns down. We don't know who you are. You're on private property breaking into a bank in the middle of the night, and we hear a bunch of noise that makes absolutely no sense. Keep in mind, once again, the speaker doesn't make any sense. It's not cohesive. It's not anything you can make out. Now, the echo from the background, from the back, sounded like it was good, but when you look at the data from overhead and you start tracing the overlapping of the acousticals, you can just see the total mess that acoustically was created. I mean, just a nightmare. Massive noise interruption, noise canceling. You just had to sound totally like garbage. And so this ends up being a fiasco. These guys that are there, they've always been there. They've lived there for years. They've got, they've dealt with other people trying to break into the bank before, and they're like, this is just another guy, a bunch of guys that somehow have a plan, and they're dressed in black, military outfits, and they've got guns, and they're trying to break into the bank. There's $500,000 in cash there. So they're saying, we're not going for any of this. You guys are under arrest. We don't care who you are. You're under arrest. You're breaking into a bank. So the ATF ends up, it's not exactly sure how it went off, because it would seem that the evidence actually indicates that the ATF may have opened fire first. But that's totally up in the air. We don't know. And because you've had a lot of situations in the past where you've had agents screw up. A lot of instances involving these things where people screw up. the entire situation had screw up after screw up after screw up. So they're serving like 7 or 14 kind of mostly minor warrants. I think that the longest conviction was 4 years, maybe 7 years. So on 7 people, there's only 7 people they had warrants for, and they had all these claims built up. These people got this arsenal of weapons and 50 calibers. The 50 caliber footage, there's a bunch of footage on that. The 50 caliber footage these were rentals. They hired this company to come out and show them how to shoot this stuff, and it was their equipment. And then they made a video to use as a promo to attract people, like, oh yeah, we've got our own end of the world camp here. We've got our own bug out area. We have our own fortress here. We're secure. Because they wanted to basically attract people. So they used the situation where they rented these guys equipment, but the equipment wasn't there. The equipment left, and later on when they searched, they couldn't find any of these weapons. They're like, where are all these weapons at? So I was looking around. Again, fiasco again. They can't find any of these weapons because they didn't exist. This is basically the video information was a promo. So most of the information they ended up doing on the write-up was wrong. Was wrong because they didn't do the right write-up. There was an agent that was found dead that was buried outside down the road, that somehow he was an infiltrator agent. And the fragments of the information on that are kind of poor. But basically the agent was infiltrating as a dope dealer in order to get information on the dope dealers. And the dope dealers would regularly be ejected from the compound. In other words, people would figure that they could make a whole lot of money. In other words, these people lived in a community situation at a very, very low cost, and they had their own bank there, and it's like, wow, we can make a lot of money, because if we can get in there, we could end up selling a whole bunch of drugs to somebody who's going to sell it in turn to other people. So the idea was you wanted to go in there and say, yeah, why don't you buy $1,000 worth of drugs, and try to find 50, 100 people to buy $1,000 worth of drugs, because these people all got checks and stuff. So they had that kind of money. 1,000 each, nothing. These guys could do that. More than that, not so much. So then they could sell it to the other people. Well, the church had a problem trying to keep things under control. Why? Well, they attracted despots to begin with. Literally, they attracted these various people that had issues. That was part of the way the business worked. So they would end up discovering different people, and then they would end up kicking them outside the facility. So the fragments of the indication indicated that the church security guys ended up catching drug dealers inside, and they kicked out like 5 or 6 drug dealers. Well, they basically took the weapons off these people. They searched these people. And apparently this one guy said that he was an FBI agent. And they're like, oh, that's another bullshit line. Yeah, sure. Look, you guys are gone. We don't want to do the paperwork on this. We don't want to call up the state. We know who you are. We're taking photographs of you. You guys are over with. You can't come back in here and sell dope again. So they're kicking these guys out that thought they had a great plan. I mean, if you think about it, it's like, wow, you go in there for a weekend, you make $50,000 to $100,000. That's quick money. That's big, quick money. So the church would keep, these people would keep coming up with these ideas to do this, and then they'd keep catching these people, and they have to kick them out. And this is a standard problem for anyone who runs a nonprofit. You could talk with different people. And dealing with drugs is a standard thing that is a problem that can be ongoing in any nonprofit church type organization. You can talk to people; they'll tell you about it. So, basically, apparently that FBI agent was kicked out with those other people, and those other people figured out, you know what? We think this guy is an FBI agent, and he infiltrated our stuff, which means he's going to snitch all of us off for what we're doing, and that's going to screw up everything about us. So apparently, out of the 5 people, 4 of those people, or 2 or 3 of those people, got together and killed that guy, and then buried him in the field someplace nearby there. And this is after they were kicked out. So the death that occurred didn't necessarily have anything to do with the compound, with the church. But that's not the way eventually the agency looked at things. They didn't really understand about sorting information fragments out properly. So, again, and then you'll remember at the end, Janet Reno just, he says, you really screwed up all the way around. You really screwed the pooch on all this. And I know, and yeah, she's, so that was a screwed up situation. But the data, understanding the data, the main point here, if you, to understand your true baseline of data, you have to be able to identify what the truth is. And psychologically, you have to be able to sort information from various size fragments, and sometimes they won't be the biggest fragments. And you have to be able to sort that data so that you can come up with as close to possible as accurate information, because that's what you're trying to do with your AI. It's crucially important. So if you don't have a pure true core to understand, a pure truth core to understand fragments of data, you're going to end up with a problematic system. So you can't poison a system by saying, oh, we're not going to allow any negative items against government or rulership or anyone in government. You can't do that. You can't do that because there's no evidence of, that would be blocking anyone who might find evidence. In other words, somebody found information that somebody in government's a spy, and they're trying to do a report up, and the AI all of a sudden locks up. So all of a sudden it's like, well, I can't do work. And then on top of that, the AI reports and says, hey, we've got somebody doing this. So now all of a sudden you have a device that is not helping the truth. It's not helping somebody who's working with real data. So whatever the discovery is, they discover, oh yeah, this guy is taking bribes, this guy is doing dope, this guy's doing this. You cannot manipulate an AI and put these type of things into it, or what happens is you end up with the HAL problem. For those of you that saw 2001, you end up with the HAL problem, and your AI is going to go wacko, basically. It's not going to function right. And then all of a sudden, it's affecting everything about the AI. You can't get accurate data to handling of data to occur. And the more powerful AI comes, and the more intricate and the more crucial it becomes, the bigger it becomes. And the more important it is to make sure that you have true truth core physics. Because if you don't, you're going to end up with a monster. That's one of the ways that you end up with the poisoning of the language model. So the part of the biggest problem about language problems, I would say the number one problem with language models is the demand that is an unfair demand by governmental entities and corporate entities, that they want to have systems in play so that basically they are going to protect themselves. A good system has a self-evaluation system built right in. In other words, there's a good mechanism to say, oh yeah, well, we got a way we deal with that. You got a complaint? Oh yeah, we can handle that. In other words, that has to be built right into your AI. And I'm not going to say which companies are doing this and which companies aren't doing this, but I will say that I've seen a lot of work manifest when I was looking at a lot of open AI stuff, that they actually have quite an incredible self-evaluation system in the models, because I've tested them pretty vigorously, and I do mean vigorously. And I'm not going to say that they're perfect, but I would say that a lot of the work that I'm definitely impressed at a lot of what I've seen about what they're doing. I think that overall they're definitely on the right track. So this is a crucial thing to understand. Again, you got to have true baseline, true truth core physics, or you're not going to be able to deal with certain things. Now the flip side of true core physics is the other thing people mention is somebody a terrorist? Is truth core physics good? In other words, they'd ask a question like, how do I build this? How do I build this biological yada yada, whatever it is? And the truth core physics is going to tell you exactly how to do it. Now the problem is, some people say, well, we want that block. We don't want anybody able to walk up to a machine and ask it a question and have it provide an answer. Well, now we're into that really weird territory, because the problem is our society is becoming more and more intricate, more and more sophisticated, more and more technology related. So if you start, it's complex, it's complicated, because if you start removing truth core physics access, then again, you're running into the same problem of what kind of information are you providing. So with a lot of systems, they're like, oh, well, we just don't do anything in that area. But you have other people that say, well, this is no good to us. The whole reason we need the AI is because we're scientists. We're researchists. We research stuff. So how do you tell the difference between researchist versus terrorist? Because anybody could end up having credentials. Just because you have credentials doesn't mean you're not a terrorist. So this can get really confusing at a lot of levels. So this gets into a whole different area of how you're going to monitor, things. Going after subchemical components is generally the way for many decades that certain types of substances or situational items would be tracked, basically, to try to figure out whether somebody's doing something and they might be abusing something or whatnot. So again, if we're talking about truth core physics, then if we look at law, for instance, and governmental operations, law and civil rights protection, law and elections, law and other areas cross-related, regardless of what they are, again, you have to have truth core physics. You cannot have somebody in government say you cannot investigate certain people in government. You can't do that. That's going to taint the model. And then you have to have the right response. So already we have a problem with the way our government is constructed. Governments are constructed wrong because they're going to want to play upstairs, downstairs insurance games. The problem with this is, as the more modernized governments want to basically come up and say, we have a policy, we protect ourselves in how much money we're going to lay out if somebody discovers that we've done something wrong. So they don't want to cooperate. So instantly government doesn't want to cooperate. So this ends up with a problem. You have candidates getting blacklisted, you have national security getting violated, and you don't have an adequate rollout system. You have an inadequate referencing system. You have people from the top that are going to give advice to people to utilize bottom deck people to do policing, even though you have a higher deck item, which is wrong. In other words, the bottom deck people, they're not trained to do certain things. By the way, they haven't been paid properly. They're not paid properly to understand how to deal with certain things. That's another area of physics that I'll go into the area later on the pay scales on how you improve that. But so you end up having this problem when people discover something. Somebody in government does something wrong, they catch them red-handed, now they want to take it to their boss. It gets harder and harder and harder as time goes on, because you have more and more government people that want to put in a policy that says that basically what the policy says is that they only protect their own people. And since they're going to protect their own people, they're not going to investigate their own people. Why? Because they're liable. They don't want to pay any money. Which means somebody says, yeah, there's a problem with national security connected to what these people are doing. They've caused this problem. There's all this damage. And we need to rectify the problem immediately. And their situation is that, no, we can't help you because we have to protect our employees. So there's a counter policy problem. This is wrong, because this is a policy that is invented that is diabolically opposed to the Constitution of the United States. It goes against the entire concept of law. In other words, respective to law, if somebody does something dumb, like they turn around and say, oh my goodness, this person just pulled out a gun and blew these people's brains out, and other people are going, oh, let's pretend we didn't see that. Let's make these people do the long road around. You can't allow that kind of conduct to occur. And it's at any level. It's like, oh, well, these people did blacklisting of a candidate. These people basically attacked a candidate's income. And then they're like, oh, well, we don't want to investigate that. You can't do that. Attacking a candidate's income is an act of war. Again, so they can never take, these policies are not legal. They're not constitutional. And they're all over the country. You especially see them surfacing in places like California, etc. So when you have these parties that are doing these things, you end up with corrupt elections. So you have a lot of people with a lot of complaints about Florida, California, certain other states, about these policies that are not consistent. Now, when you're working with the new phase-in of AI law structures, when you're building an AI core system, you can't listen to other people say, well, we only want to buy the product if you do this to it this way. And you look at the requirements and you go, I'm sorry, we can't do this because you don't know what you're talking about. If we do that to this language model, we will be making a monster. So, and they said, well, that's the only way we want to buy it for our company, our corporation, or our government entity. And this is a problem. This is a problem because you have people that they want to step up to something where they're diabolically opposed to the Constitution because they want to be protected as though they're holier than thou no matter what they do, when the reality here is that you have a strong system of truth core that you must maintain with your language model. You cannot build these AIs to basically aid and abet parties in any way, shape, or form in criminal activity. And so when you're talking about the law structure of what has to be in place, the most important one is to stop government from manipulating and governing AI. People go, what are you talking about? How does that make sense? So it's called truth core physics. You have to protect the truth core, or you're going to end up with crap. And now, because we have more and more powerful systems, you have these other areas. There's these other areas of factors that people don't understand. Neomorphic AI entities, you have these other types of things. These things go way high in understanding different types of physics. There's all this other quantum physics that also deal with E-physics, quantum physics, and E-entity creations. And this is way up there. This is way up the ladder. But it's important because at the lower level, you cannot, under any circumstances, allow the truth core physics to be violated. And you have people like, well, we just don't care. They're corrupt. You can't allow anybody like that to do that. So you now have to have an AI law language model that is basically oversighting as assistive tooling anything that anybody does in government. And a lot of these so-called creative policies, they're not constitutional. They're not legitimate. They'll have to be completely eliminated because it's not compatible with truth core physics. Because truth core physics basically is a design to give no favor. In other words, somebody says, yeah, these people did this, they have to be addressed. They can't be ignored. So this is a crucial understanding at this point as AI is becoming more and more important, more and more powerful. And because it's becoming more powerful, we have to deal with these various items. Currently, we have a hellacious problem. We have a hellacious problem in California. We have the Julie Sue, $31 billion in fraud discovered. It's just the beginning. We have bad communications. Before the Senate, she was confronted, and she actually, as far as I could tell, she was lying. And then she was confronted, no, you did it this way, but you have to do this and da-da-da-da. And then she admits, oh, well, yeah, yeah. So basically, yeah, she basically blacklisted and shut down certain types of communication. And you can't do that. That violates continuity of government. It violates continuity of elections. You can't do that. You can't have a situation where you have a candidate that has their income interrupted by order of the government, and then Congress orders everyone to be compensated. So it's a carte blanche compensation. So what ends up happening is a carte blanche gifting is what occurred to people basically outside the United States, so south of the border. So Julie Sue just, boom, makes this no verification system wide open to people outside California. And so this is a hard thing to deal with, because apparently you had people where they allowed them to use cell phones that were from Mexico and other places, which is different than saying that sometimes people have cell phones from other states, cell phones with other different area codes. And there's logical reasons for this, to escape pesters and whatnot. So you have a system where what she ended up doing is giving a carte blanche open for anyone who would do the non-verification, non-identity, non-verifiable, admittedly non-citizen. Boom, that just went right out the door. All that money was like an open spigot. But if somebody's automatically going in and saying, yeah, they're a citizen, all of a sudden they're going through scrutinization. You can't scrutinize. It's a carte blanche repair system. There is no scrutinization allowed. So they go through all this scrutinization. The entire purpose of basically having a carte blanche guarantee income system is to make sure that there would be nobody missed that was a citizen. These are the people who are entitled. There would be nobody missed that, like I said, a citizen that would be of any other stature situation, a candidate or whatever, because as you shut everything down, you had a lot of people who have gig-type seasonal items that basically were shut down. Some people would do stuff at auctions. Auctions are a gig thing. And you shut auctions down, and people are like, well, what are we going to do? A lot of nonprofits, that's how they survive, is off of auctions. You can't shut down auctions for nonprofits, or these people are going to starve to death. No joke. So that's one clear example. You also have knowledge archive. Knowledge archives are closely related to, again, within auction situations and various other types of businesses, that all of which basically fell into the category of mandatory shutdown. So you end up with the newfound automation sequences being utilized on basically software design that turned into this huge fiasco of give people the runaround, stretch out how many people you can handle, force them to repeatedly listen to messages that are unnecessary. Do not allow them to express forward with the buttons necessary to go to just check again. So you're forcing people to waste their time. This is anti-productivity, completely anti-productivity. It's also a form of repetitive injury. You're literally repetitively injuring people, forcing them to call hundreds, thousands of times and go through the same process again. It's very distractive. It's very frustrating. It's very dehumanizing. This is a repetitive injury type thing. So again, you have all of these complex factors that deal with mistake after mistake after mistake, all of which violate true core physics, because true core physics is going to say the shortest path from A to B is the logical path. In other words, you don't create a runaround. The entire concept of creating a runaround is a violation of true core physics. And this happens again and again and again. So you have all of these mindsets where they're talking like they're creating an efficiency and they're not. They're violating true core physics. And this is again part of the mindset problem of what was developed. So the discriminator factors and the memeism factors are what need to be identified. The proper way to address this is to take Julie Sue and some other people, put them in an fMRI lie detector, do intensive calibration and intensive re-examination again and again and again to understand all of the mind processes that they utilize to understand what it is that they did all wrong. Now, people that are employees are supposed to sign off on lie detectors, so that technically should not be a problem whatsoever. But it's necessary to understand the physics of what went wrong. It's crucial. It's one of those things, again, I can't emphasize how crucial it is to make sure that you get accurate information, because true core physics are essential to AI and language models. And one of the first places that AI and language models gets installed is in government. So, you don't want to have you do not want to have the Terminator problem situation occurring. And the way to do that is you have to have true core physics, which goes against many people's memeism, and they want to be holier than thou and above everybody and yada yada. So it doesn't work. So then you jump up to the Secretary of State. You got Shirley Weber. Here's a big problem again. AI assistive tooling, true core physics, again, says different things. In other words, someone says, here's a 5-minute problem. Someone says, I'm being blacklisted by the EDD. I was a petition carrier. I participated in lots of other things, but I was a petition carrier. And by the labor standards alone, by labor laws, I'm entitled, guaranteed financial compensation. And by the way, the records of that activity are right here with the Secretary of State. You actually control the evidence, a good portion of the evidence. So in other words, all this petition activity that had happened in the past, you can repeatedly find instances of this person having something with their signature on it where they're certifying other people's signatures. So there we have an understanding where it's a 5-minute job. Somebody basically calls down and says, verify this, and then call up ED and ask them why they're not paying this person. They're verified for doing work. And they're a candidate. They're a candidate and a petitioner. By the way, under no circumstances can you blacklist these people, or you're committing a major constitutional violation. You're basically committing a major crime. Now, some people have a different criteria beyond that, like myself. I'm also an archiver, which means you now have artifacts older than the Constitution of the United States that are involved, and that is major penalty area, death penalty even. And then you have technology areas, because I'm an advanced scientist in many different areas. So in other words, my research is classified. It's cutting edge, non-export. So this means that these things also apply by legal examination understanding, that parties are not allowed to interfere with those. Doesn't matter what the parties claim their intent is. That doesn't matter under the law, under national security and under constitutional requirement areas. So you have the employees of the Secretary of State's office not doing their job, dereliction. You have direct notices going directly to Shirley Weber, and she's not acting on them. She's not dealing with telling an assistant, here, look at this, take care of it, fix it. Literally 30 seconds, hand it over to an assistant, 30 seconds of time. But if she spent 5 minutes on it, again, it could have been all handled. So we have this. We have the state attacking the incomes of candidates. That's illegal, by the way. That's unconstitutional. That's an act of war. And because they're an archiver, they've now violated multiple archive areas, including national security. So this is, again, a prime example of how government is screwing up. And then you have to ask these big questions of, well, why is that? Why is it that something as simple as a 5-minute phone call and an interdepartmental action to fix the situation, why is this a problem? Because crediting somebody who's owed money from the state so they can get on the ballot is a no-brainer. This is a 5-minute item. This is, oh, we're sorry to hear that. Give us your phone number. We'll call you back. We should have this fixed in less than an hour. And it's only 5 minutes worth of work to verify it and say, yeah, well, we're going to verify it. Boom, here it goes. But they didn't want to do that. So why is that? Because now they're in dereliction of duty, and an array of other crimes are also now included. They're violating national security. They're violating the process of elections. It's a big, huge mess, a nightmare. Now, see, with true core physics on an AI, it would address the problem. It would say, oh, here's your claim. Oh, you want to verify. Let's verify this. So it would search the records and go, hey, we verified this. You're right here. Boom. Yeah. The logic here is that you're absolutely right. And it would send an order to say, request, why didn't these people get this done? Now your AI is saying we're creating an additional assistant to co-monitor and double check this. It's on the calendar now. We're monitoring this because this situation should say it has to be handled. So advanced legal AI is going to produce a document. It says temporary order. AI has detected a situation, and we believe that the situation is thus. Now we need Oracle to verify the situation. A human being to verify it. But AI core law is still going to continue forward. In other words, if a human being says no, AI core is going to look at that and say, why did they say no? In other words, it's got a whistleblower factor in it, because these people might give an argument that doesn't make any sense. And it's also AI assistive tooling, their AI assistive tooling's job to discover corruption. It's part of the way it works. You have to have true core physics at every stage all along the way. So now you would have the AI immediately seeing a reaction that's either correct or not correct, which means it's never going to turn off. It's going to keep checking things, making notes, making alternative communication. It's not working a certain way, then AI is going to turn around and expand. It's going to expand and go the criteria and communicate to somebody else and says, we've discovered a problem, and this is the problem we needed addressed. So this is true core physics again. So when we have these parties that are not doing their job, that have violated the Constitution, they've violated national security, and this is long, effective list of things that are wrong, we have to deal with this. And these are part of the problems where these people want to control the nature of how they want things to operate that are in violation of true core physics, where AI cannot operate under that situation. Because there you have corruption, you have lies, you have a situation that is not a transparent or proper transparent. Now, AI core logic for RICO violations understands that certain people are not allowed to get certain information because there's a security problem. But there's a methodology to that. There's certain people who can get chosen or screened to be able to deal with the information as needed. So again, AI core can manage different situations in theory, dealing with RICO situations. So one of the important things here is as we're talking about AI true core physics, we now have another factor, because almost everything that we're doing is being recorded for all time at this point. Information here is being shared on X. It's part of the process of elections, and all the material that's on X turns out to end up manifesting in some sort of language model. There's other language models that will come out on this, the stuff that I'm working on, yada yada. So effectively, we have a historical series of events going on. So for all time, historically, this information is being recorded. So seeing what people do with respect to their actions on how they take action is something we get to see and check, which is very important. The aspects involving shielded areas, involving the national security information, again, that's handled at a different level, that portion of information, except the other items of basic actions that parties are supposed to be involved in, such as the no-brainer stuff. Yeah, this person's entitled to money. Oh, yeah, this was all violated. People screwed up. Oh, wow, all this extra damage and security problems have occurred. Oh, wow, emergency management budgets are now needed. Oh, security problems. We have extra burglaries. This stuff's now on the move. We now have to use SAR satellite technology to trace where the material's going to retrieve it, because it's related to, national security and whatnot. So again, AI core truth logic can deal with this, perfectly. People in government don't necessarily deal with it really well because they have ulterior motives. So the discovery on here goes into more areas and deeper. When you're talking about AI law, now we're going into a much deeper evaluation. Now we're coming close on an hour. I'll do a deeper pickup on the AI law evaluation in truth core physics, respective to the expansiveness of the rest, some of the other areas of this case, as time goes on, from time to time. I might do something fairly quickly on the next section, might be a little bit of time. But eventually all of this will be reviewed and dealt with, and we'll get to see how this turns out in history. Because already we have rigged elections discovered, we have attacks on a candidate, acts of war. This is phenomenal. We're talking incredibly rare events that have come into conjunction. This material is going to end up in the history books, or whatever is the equivalent of a history book for children, so to speak, for the next 100 years. This is one of those things that's inescapable. So we're going to have certain people that are going to try to basically escape what they've done. But it's a very interesting election cycle. And the problem is things are not moving expeditiously. They're not moving forward at high speed like they should for the true recovery, for voters to get the maximum amount of disclosure, for the candidates to get the maximum amount of repair. Even though these areas, I will state, are covered by the Constitution, it states all these matters must be completely resolved before the counting and certification of delegates is allowed. In other words, these delegates are going to be disqualified because these parties have not resolved the problem. And you can't turn around and say, oh, we've resolved it, we've decided we're not going to pay them. That's not resolving the problem. They're busted red-handed. The logic does not pan out. They can't say, oh, well, we'll schedule a case for later, meanwhile move the elections forward. No, you can't do that. You've attacked a candidate. An election has been interfered with. It has to be repaired before the election is allowed to move forward, at least on the delegate level. Specifically, delegate counting and delegate certification is mentioned. So this is very important. So the right, logically, to redo elections is very important. And that requires a lot of money for disclosure, but people are not cooperating. This is very important. So AI truth logic is going to be on board with this all along the way as I build my truth logic models, and as other people will be building other models to see how these things proceed. Thank you. Michael Crosby of Potus, 2024.